Alright, this is day 2 of the inverse function sections. Yesterday we covered the graphing portion, now we're going to get into the actual equations. And this is very much tied to the algebra part, very equation-based, very algebra, not as much graphing today. And I know some of you kind of cringe when you hear that because you don't feel as comfortable with it. So let's start off with just some easy stuff. Let's get our brains kind of back in that algebra mindset before we dig into the little bit more complicated equations. Opposite of addition is subtraction. That's an inverse property. Inverse just means undo, do the opposite, switch, reverse, all of those things. Okay, pretty basic for that one. X equals 2, nothing too crazy yet. Opposite of subtraction is addition. So far, just real easy review to get us kind of in the mindset of it. Down here, fraction means divide. Well, what's the opposite of division? Multiplication. So if I'm dividing by 2, I got to multiply both sides by 2. That's going to get rid of these guys. So all I have left is x equals 20, which makes sense because 20 divided by 2 gets me 10. And then over here, when things are right next to each other, remember that means multiply. So you got to divide to get rid of it. Divide both sides by the number you're trying to cancel out, and you get your answer. Okay, so nothing too crazy, just to start us off. Make sure you write those down. I know that seems easy. Write it down anyway, because it's a good review to have. Alright, so previously we focused on just switching the numbers on our graph. Today we're going to actually be using the equations of the graph, okay, to help us figure out the inverse. Alright, so if I'm looking at my red graph, we're not going to do quite the algebra stuff, we're just going to get the line figured out. And put it right there. Alright, so for my red graph, it crosses the x-axis right here. That's my y-intercept at 2. The slope goes up 4, right 6. Up 4, right 6. So there's my graph of that line. I know I can reduce 4/6. I'm not going to worry about it for right now. I'm just practicing getting my line. The inverse one, the blue one, crosses right there, which is between -2 and -4. So that's -3. And it goes up 6, right 4, which makes sense because yesterday we talked about the slopes are reciprocals of each other. Now the y-intercepts are going to be very different. They're going to come into play a little bit later. But that is where the equations are. Or sorry, that is what the equations are. And we'll get back to that part, but I just wanted you guys to practice getting the equation from the graph. So getting the y-intercept, getting the slope. So write that down, kind of hold on to that thought for a little bit later. Alright, so here are your steps for finding the inverse. Yes, I know, it doesn't make sense right now. Pause, write it down, get it copied, and then I will explain it as we go through the next ones. Okay, so pause here. Alright, so first step says change f of x to y. That just means in my equation, it's going to start off as f parentheses x. That just means function. Just change it to a y. They're the same thing. We've talked about that before. It's okay. You can change them. Switch the x and the y. That means literally switch their spots. Don't change their sign. Don't change the number. Just switch them. Just like we did with the graphing yesterday. Only this time it's x and y. It's not numbers. Then we're going to actually start solving for y all over again. And the last step is important because we talked about this is how you write inverse function of x. It is not pronounced f to the -1 power. If you say that, you will sound ridiculous, so don't say it. It's inverse function of x. That is the proper way to say this abbreviation, not f to the -1 power or f -1. It's not right. Alright, so I'm going to do a dual page. There we go. And let's see if it'll let me pin this guy. There we go. Now I have my steps there for myself. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so I've color-coded each of the steps to help us remember. So it says change f of x to y. Alright, well that's pretty easy. Instead of f of x, all I'm going to do is put y, and then everything else remains the same. Step 1, done. Cool. Step 2, switch the x and the y. That means nothing else changes. I just take the y and the x and they trade spots. Like so. That's all step 2 means. Just change their spots. Step 3, solve for y. Well, that's just our algebra stuff. I'm trying to get this by itself as if it was x, but this time I'm solving for y. All right, well, I can't do anything with the 4 yet. I got to work outside in with equations. So I got to get rid of the 5. Remember, this is why we reviewed it at the beginning. Those go away. So I have 4y equals x plus 5. No, they do not become 5x. 5x means 5 times x. X plus 5 means x plus 5, so don't change it. I got to get y by itself. Well, right now it's being multiplied by 4, so opposite of multiplying is dividing. That's going to go away. So I have y equals x plus 5 over 4. I'm not going to try and simplify it. It's perfect the way it is. Leave it. Pause if you need to. And then the last step, step 4, says change y back to inverse function of x, that symbol. So in place of y, all I'm going to do is replace it with this symbol. Looks like f to the negative 1 power. It's not. Don't say it. Just write it. And there's your answer. So this equation, if I was to graph this guy, my original equation, and I was to graph this, they would be inverses of each other. That's why we focused on the graphing yesterday and the equations today. Those pictures should be reflections of each other. Okay, that's how you find it algebraically. Pause here, take notes, and then move it along. All right, example 2. All right, let's start with the easy step. Change f of x to y. That's pretty easy. All I gotta do is change that to a y. Whew, not too bad yet. Not too scary. Just changing that. Step 1, done. Step 2, switch the x and the y. Still not too crazy yet. Here's my y, here's my x. 3y over negative 2. Again, not too crazy so far. Step 3 is where we start having to do a little bit of legwork. Alright, so I gotta get y by itself for step 3. Now I can't deal with the 3, I can't deal with the plus 2 on the top until I deal with this guy. This divided by negative 2. Well, what is the opposite of dividing? Yes, it is multiplying. Congratulations, good job. Whatever I do to one side, I gotta do to the other. So now I have negative 2x equals, these go away, 2 plus 3y. That was probably the hardest part of the whole problem. From there, I hope it is pretty easy. Okay, can't deal with the 3 yet, so don't try and get rid of that. Subtract the 2 first. No, this does not become 0x. It does not become negative 4x. It becomes negative 2x minus 2. Don't try and combine things that are not like terms. You can't combine x with just a number. And then we have 3y. Hopefully you already see the last step in your head or you've done it. This is being multiplied. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So divide both sides by 3. Those are going to go away. So y equals negative 2x minus 2 all over 3. Again, those would be inverse functions of each other. All right, the last step, change y back to inverse function of x. Again, hopefully a nice easy step to end the whole process with. All I'm doing is taking this and changing it to that. And then rewriting the whole thing. Yes, I know it seems silly. Yes, you have to change it to f with the little negative 1 of x, because that means inverse, otherwise you aren't labeling it properly. And boom, there's your inverse function. Pause here, get your notes, move on to the next one. I believe there are, there are 3 more. Okay. All right, so this guy, Let's see, change f of x to y. Done. Switch x and y. Done. This is so easy so far. Step 3, solve for y. Okay, this is not going to be as easy, but we can do it. All right, again, can't get to the +2 or the squared until I get rid of this guy. That's pretty easy. Opposite of subtraction is addition. Pretty easy so far. Nothing too crazy. X plus 3, bye-bye, equals y plus 2 squared. Fantastic. All right, now how do we get rid of squaring things? What is the opposite of squaring something? I hope you're saying it in your brain. I hope you're saying square root. Boom. Squareds undo square roots, so all I have is y plus 2 on this side. Now, here's the doozy with this guy. When you take a square root of something, you have to account for the fact that it has to be positive and negative. The reason for that is if I do -5 squared, I get the same thing as +5 squared. So I have to make sure I put a plus and minus here. Okay? Again, when you square a negative, you square a positive, you get the same thing. So when I undo it, I have to account for both. Yes, it kind of sucks. I'm not going to lie. It's really annoying. But just deal with it. Put a star by it if you need to. Try and remember you got to put the plus or minus anytime you take a square root. Don't worry about it with squaring stuff. That doesn't matter. Just square root. Final step to get y by itself is -2. That looks a little funky, but it just really goes in the front. That's all it does. So it's -2 because it's -2. Plus or minus the square root of x plus 3 equals y. Whew! That was a lot of work on that one, but not totally impossible. And last step, change this little y back to inverse function of x and rewrite the whole doggone thing, or just erase the y, I suppose you could do that. Feel free to rewind and hear that part again if you need to. That one was kind of crazy. All right, fourth example. Woo, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I'm going to jump through the first part. Change it to y. Switch the x and y. Don't be freaked out by the cubed root. You can do this. You got this. Remember, work your way from the outside to the inside of the equation. Get rid of that +4 first. That's the easy part. 4, x minus 4 equals cubed root of y minus 1. All right, well, think about roots. The opposite of squaring is taking the square root. The opposite of cube rooting must be cubing it. Roots and powers undo each other. So to get rid of that, I got to do that. So x minus 4 cubed equals y minus 1. Easy last step. Get the +1. That +1 does not go in the parentheses. Don't you dare put it in with the 4. Put it on the outside. Just like that. And then change it to that. X minus 4 cubed plus 1. Boom, that one's done too. Fabulous. All right, for timing reasons, I'm going to leave off on this one because I don't have enough time to go through in this video. To find the answer for this question, look on the PDF that's attached to this Google Classroom announcement. There should be a link to that, and then there will be notes filled in. Hopefully you can follow along with that. If you need help, feel free to ask a classmate or email me if you're kind of struggling with that one.